reintroduction for you, Tia. So as I admit some people into the Zoom meeting, I'd just like to introduce Tia Teeft. She's an organic farmer and she started a new business called Gardens Keep Company. And she's going to be talking to us today about vegetable seed sourcing, getting organized, and how to get growing, plus some native plants. So as we go along today, I forgot to ask you, Tia, if you wanted to take questions mostly at the end, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, we'll take them at the end today.
Yeah, okay, so, but feel free to put questions into the chat as we go, just so you don't forget them. There'll be definitely a lot of time at the end for some Q&A, in which case you can unmute yourself to ask your questions or put them in the chat at that time. So I'll turn it over to Tia now to talk about gardening.
Awesome, Ryan. Thank you so much again for having me back for the second year in a row. I can't explain how much it means for the Grimsby Library to support new small business. So like Ryan said, my name is Tia. My full name is Tian. So I'm an organic farmer and a garden mentor. I work at Mingle Hill Farms. They're located in St. Anne's. And I also run my business, Gardens Keep Company, and I help new and seasoned growers with consultations and coaching sessions. So we're going to cover a lot today and a spectrum of things. So grab a pen as we get started and take some notes and write down your questions. So gardening is so much more than just growing food and flowers and herbs. It's such a therapy to be able to connect with the earth, learn about nature, and to become curious about the world and how it interacts with one another. So we'll dive in, we'll review sort of a few different growing options based on your space, where to place those options, and then we'll also discuss how to fill your gardens, native plants, all that fun stuff. So for creating your garden space, so what I have up here on the slide is you will see there's two garden beds here. Tree line to the north, the sun, of course, in the south, and the house, I should say, is on the west. So when building your garden, whether it's in-ground, raised bed, always think about 4 different things. So that'll be your sun exposure, your water source, the convenience or accessibility, and the aesthetics. So for number 1, sun exposure, the sun coming here from the south, it's going to nicely hit and cover both of these raised beds, especially if you have, say, a tall trellis here. You'll keep your nice tall vegetables in the back, like your climbing peas, and then some kale. And then at the front, you'll have more of your lower veg for access so that the sun doesn't block out as it continues to move up the garden bed. So for leafy greens, they're going to want about 4 hours of sunlight a day. Roots like about 6, and fruiting plants like tomatoes and eggplants, they're going to want 8+ of sunlight a day. So for those, the more the merrier. Over here, you'll see that I have a little like water symbol there just to symbolize a water spigot. So it can be such a buzzkill having to carry like a heavy watering can back and forth to your garden through the day, especially on those really hot days that especially we had last summer. It can be a lot. You can also go big and you can go to a formal irrigation system by installing it, having someone come to install it, literally digging through the ground and having drip line run through your garden bed. There's also a meet in the middle option here as well. One, just a nice garden hose with a spray and a mister nozzle. Then you can also do a garden hose, which you can just sort of run from your spigot to your raised bed. And then you can attach a drip line, which you can get from places like Canadian Tire and Home Hardware. And you can just weave it through your garden bed, making sure that you're getting nice coverage through the bed. And what's great about that option is you can even connect a timer right to your garden hose over here, so it can shut off. Never walk away from your garden when you're watering it. If it is on a timer, like don't go inside and start cooking something, but it'll definitely allow you to not have to be hands-on in your garden that whole time if watering has become too much. So for things like convenience and accessibility, for this garden plan here, you'll notice on the house, just with my little blue cursor here, this symbolizes your door. So coming out of the house, it's really nice to sort of, and convenient to walk right through the garden here. So these garden beds, looking at it, are about 2.5 feet spaced apart. That means you're going to have a lot of space to maneuver around if you're having multiple beds. And these beds aren't too wide, meaning that you can access them from both sides. So in terms of accessibility, it's going to look amazing when you walk out and go right through to your garden. And aesthetics, that's something that you can totally decide on your own. Maybe you don't like the look of wood raised garden bed. Maybe you want to try something different, sort of based off more the look of your house, or items that are already incorporated into your landscape, like maybe cork metal gardens are what you're going to go for, or stone, but that's totally up to you and the budget that you have for yourself. Know that a garden isn't perfect. Plants really just want to grow. So these are just a few pillars to sort of work from when thinking about your plan and creating, so that your garden will get the most benefit from all of those aspects throughout the season. So we're going to go over a few different options for you in terms of actually when you're growing and what you're growing in. So there are so many different ways, like I said, to continue to grow. People do it in so many different ways. So like an amazing option is growing in containers. That's fantastic if you don't have a lot of space. So there are people such as Kevin Espiritu from Epic Gardening and Luai from Urban Farm and Kitchen. He's located in Toronto. They grow so much of their gardens between raised beds and containers, 5-gallon pails, grow bags. Luai actually uses refurbished eaves troughs around his patio perimeter, like on the fence, and he grows radishes and leafy greens in them. It just gives you a bit more square footage to grow in. So whether or not you have that big space for in-ground or a raised garden bed, with a container, you can easily create that as long as you have drainage holes in whatever you're draining in to make sure that the water is allowed to sort of release from your garden there too. In-grounds, they can be a really fun option. So this is option 2. It can be a fun option if you have a bit more space to work with or grow with, like if you're on a farm or a larger backyard. It will reduce some costs in terms of materials, maybe not having to get either as much wood if you want to put a border on it or that kind of thing. And you can also utilize in-ground beds by working in your edible landscape, maybe by moving things a little closer to some ornamental beds or some pollinator gardens. And then raised beds is the third option, and that's the option that I more commonly lean towards, because it is similar to growing in a container, but of course it's permanent, but you do have the benefits, whereas it's nice, porous, beautiful, aerated, nutritious soil that you sort of build yourself. It's going to be warmer sooner in the season because it's, of course, raised bed. And the pests could potentially be minimized a little bit because, again, it's literally raised more from the ground. Rabbits, pups, that kind of thing won't have as much access to it. And of course, it is aesthetically pleasing as well. I should mention it's great for your back too, not having to crouch down all day. It's fabulous. So we'll move on to filling these beds. So in a nutshell, this is sort of what a container will look like. So this is as if you cut it in half and you're looking through your garden bed here or container. If you are in a container, a potting mix might be better than a triple mix just because it'll be a bit more aerated for you. But looking through it, your bottom layer, so say underneath here is going to be like your turf or your grass. You can remove that by using like a spade or a garden shovel. After, of course, you've marked out where your garden is going to go. So you're going to have your cardboard here, and the cardboard, wet it, and that's going to just help to stop weeds from sort of encroaching over time. And you want the cardboard to even go a little bit outside the space of your garden. That just means that weeds on the outside won't be able to sort of encroach through those corners and make their way into your garden bed. So once your cardboard is down and it's wet, you have the option to add organic matter. So if you're working in a shorter raised bed, I would definitely recommend maybe mixing in some organic matter with your soil. But if you're working in a tall raised bed, like 16 to 24 inches tall, you might want to utilize putting in things like straw, leaves, larger twigs. If your bed is really tall, you might want to even put in some like actual tree trunks, depending on what you can use. That'll just create a bit more height for you, and it'll decrease soil costs as well, which is always fantastic. And over time, it will decompose, and that just means you'll top it up each season, which of course you want to do with a raised bed to keep it nice and fresh. So once you have that layer of organic matter, optional, you're going to add your soil here. So you want to invest in a nice quality soil. Soil, again, is your number one healthy aspect of a garden bed. Usually a mix of like compost, sand, and topsoil is amazing. So make sure to do your research here. Avoid synthetics, any herbicides and fungicides within a mix. Make sure to read a bag if you're purchasing from a nursery. Ideally, you want to look for on a label like organic soil for vegetable and flower gardens, and find a nice organic brand as well. It's nice to look for the certification, whether it's ProCert, EcoCert, or OMRI, which are all organic certifications, or umbrellas. To know how much soil you want to use in your garden bed, there is a website called gardeners.com, so it's garden supply. And if you just type that in, they have an amazing soil calculator option right on their website. And you just type in the size of your garden, whether it's 8x3, and how tall it is. Maybe it is 12 inches tall. And with that math there, you're going to want about 0.9 yards of soil, so a yard. And what you can just do with that is maybe you want to buy a yard bag then. But if you say only need a few square feet to top up, then go with the bags from the nursery without having to order a truck. So using a soil calculator really does help to see how much soil you're going to need, and it will determine the costs you're going to take on your soil too. So lastly, you can, or you should, add your compost. So usually 1 to 2 inches of compost, which is this top layer right here, is really going to improve, hi Adri, is really going to improve the quality of your garden bed and the health of your plants. So you can add ones like sheep, mushroom, or other organic matter, or aged manures will do. If you have your own compost bin, that's absolutely fantastic. And you're truly increasing the biodiversity of your soil in doing that as well. Optionally, you can mix in some rock dust just for the health of your soil. It'll add micronutrients into your compost mix there too. And throughout the season, like when you're doing like a big sort of garden refresh, moving from spring to summer to fall, when you do those refreshes, you want to top up your garden in terms of maybe taking 1/2 inch to 1 inch of compost on top of your garden again. And that might mean your compost, or it might even be some worm castings, just to sort of give it that boost before you do a whole switch of season as well. Alrighty, so take the time, make a plan. We will go over that in Gardening Talk Part 2, but in terms of making your plan, actually decide what you like to eat. If you only had broccoli twice this year, maybe don't grow a 100-day broccoli head, because you only get one, in your garden, because it'll take up quite a bit of space. If greens are your thing, plant a whole bunch of greens. You can utilize a lot of that ground cover with greens too, which is fantastic. So starting seeds indoors. So this little setup photo that I've got here is actually what my setup looks like now, which is just behind me here. And everyone's is going to look different. So you might have a big south-facing window that you're going to use, which is, I mean, fantastic. So what you're going to do is there's a few different options that you can have. So like I said, you don't have to have a huge setup to get started. It really does just help to have an overhead light if you're interested in starting inside, because it does regulate your seeds and it'll stop them from stretching towards the sun and that kind of thing. So my entire setup that I have here, my stand behind me is just from Canadian Tire. It was about $100. My light, it was about $200, and everything else for containers was collected. So these containers, thanks Mingle Hill, they're from there. The pots were a gift. I even have a gold solo cup over there that I use for some deep roots. And my little seed starting container in gray is from Lee Valley. So there's a lot of different options that you can use in terms of your trays. But an overhead light is a great investment. Your seedlings, like I said, won't constantly be pulled, and it will ensure like a steady growth. A fan, best investment. So right over here, which you can't see outside the photo, I have a little fan there that I turn on when I need the seedlings to get a little bit of airflow. It'll help to avoid dampening off, which is really common in like beets, Swiss chard, and spinach. That's just like a little fungus that happens through the soil. And it'll improve the root system because the fan will mimic the wind as well. So as it moves, the roots will strengthen. So seed starting mix. I get my seed starting mix just from Cole's Nursery here in town. They have a great organic mix by Fafard. It's Pro certified, and it's fantastic because it's porous, so it has airflow, but it also retains a nice amount of moisture for my seedlings. And always looking for that certification label when you're getting your seed mix. So another great investment at the bottom here is I got my little watering can and mister. The watering can's out of sight there, but I use the watering can just to bottom feed this little tray here. So I've got little seedlings. I don't want to usually water up ahead, I should say from over top on seedlings like this because they're so delicate, and again, they can get more of that dampening off. So watering from the bottom is a great option because it'll fully soak through the entire cell. It doesn't mean just the top layer is going to be wet. And then with the mister, I would use that on something like this one here, where I have vermiculite on top, and I just want to keep that vermiculite wet as it continues to germinate. So vermiculite this year was new for me. It's just a mineral. You can get it at any grocery store or nursery, and you can sprinkle it. There's different options in terms of more fine or grainy. I got a pretty grainy one and I sprinkled it on top of my seedlings. There was no issue with growth at all, but it did again hold in a bit more of that moisture. So it just means I had to water it less as germination was happening underneath the soil there. And it was great because I could just hover over those babies in the morning without having to worry about them not getting their water. Last, an amazing option for when starting seeds indoors is have a heat mat. I didn't get one this year, but it would lay right underneath of the seed starts here. Although next year I will definitely plan on getting one, just based off other research and seeing other growers. That is such a game changer, as the temperature in this room here can really fluctuate throughout the day. So having a heat mat really just ensures that constant heat as a seed is starting to germinate, and hopefully it will germinate more reliably as well. So there are so many different seeds to start at home. Usually you want to get an earlier start on items that don't like to be planted out early. So that would be things like tomatoes and peppers and eggplants. A lot of your fruiting veg or long-term items like cabbage and broccoli. So when seeding at home, just on an overall scale, when seeding here, what I do to get this little setup here is I take a big bowl and I fill it with my seed starting mix. I add some warm water because the warm water will help the seed to germinate. And then I mix it together. So the soil should be like nice and sort of concentrated. So when you squeeze it, water shouldn't totally drip out of it, but it should stay together in your hand when you do squeeze it. So you can find your balance by adding more water or more soil, but you're going to find that balance. Then you're going to fill your little cells like these ones. And seeds, when you're seeding them, they are generally planted at a depth that is about twice the size of a seed. So bigger seeds will go a little deeper, like a pea seed, whereas a basil seed, which is like dust, that'll be just seeded right on top. And then you can just keep it wet with a mister. So check your seed pack if you're not sure of how deep. It'll usually say like 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch deep, that kind of thing. And then water them once you cover that seed and tuck it back in. So you'll water it in and make sure that you label it so that you know right away what it is, because sometimes it can be hard to tell with the different cotyledon, that's the new leaf. It can be a little different. to see what it is when it pops up. So once they're all labeled, you can just put it right under light once germination occurs. So different seeds have different needs again, so keep that in mind. So for example, like a bachelor button seed, that's a nice cornflower, they need to germinate in complete darkness. So what I've done is I just put like a darker piece of paper over top of them to let them germinate in the darkness. Hi guys. And then for other seeds, they need that full light exposure as well. So this year at Mingle Hill, Emily, my lovely boss who is here, she has been doing a lot of early seed germination by putting them in the fridge, just in a paper towel, keeping them damp. So that has been really fantastic for helping us start things that are hard to germinate. So example, like older seeds, maybe some of our perennials. And we've always had a hard time with ground cherries, which are an amazing like pineapple flavored fruit that just grows on the ground. Obviously, they're so beautiful and little husks and fantastic, but they're really hard to germinate. So we have a nice chunk this year, all because Emily started them in bags. So make sure to keep your eye on that when starting your seeds. So when you have all of your seedlings, so for example, I have all these lovely seedlings here, I want to make sure that I'm going to harden these off before I plant them outside in the ground or in a raised bed or a pot. So hardening off is the process of like acclimatizing your plant for new weather. So for the cold, pretty much. So mid-April is the ideal time to get your spring garden rolling. So hats off to any gardeners who do year-round gardening or garden under cover with fresh greens. So if you're planting outside, things like lettuce, beets, tatsoi, pak choi, and more that you want to harden those ones off before they go in the ground. So they have become accustomed to like the coziness inside this little seed section here, right? So what you want to do is hardening off takes about 4 days, sometimes a week, depending on the weather. But you want to slowly bring your plants outside before they go in their growing space. So we'll do a quick 4-day schedule here. So on day 1, your plants are going to go outside for a few hours. Keep them in the shade, just because you don't want to shock them too much. And then you're going to bring them back at night. On day 2, you're going to bring your plants outside for a nice chunk of the day, maybe dappled with a little bit of sunlight so they start to get that feel. Again, at night, you're bringing them in. On day 3 of hardening off, you're going to bring your plants outside, definitely exposing them to more sunlight, and then you're going to leave them out overnight. And then day 4, that's their transplant day into the permanent home, into their growing spot, and make sure to give them plenty of water once you've transplanted them into the ground. And I will say to keep your eye on the weather here. You don't want to choose 4 days of rain or potential frost or snow. If you're gardening in the spring, Mother Nature is still like all over the map. So what you're going to want to do is make sure that you're picking a nice chunk of time where there's going to be a little bit of sunshine for you to harden off your plants. So a little note is if you are planning to garden in the spring, especially during our April season, I'm sure that you've noticed that our weather has already been snowing for an hour the other day and then beautiful sunshine. So I highly recommend implementing like a cover to your garden outside or whatever you're gardening in. So that might mean like a literal, like a cloche, like a plastic container over top that still lets in light, or maybe a cloth, like frost cloth that you can purchase, or a nice sheet of plastic that you can continually reuse throughout the season. So that's just so that if the temperature does dip overnight, you're taking those precautions to protect your new seedlings. So I do love using a little bit of plastic. At the farm, we have some amazing frost cloth that we cover our nice long rows with. So what this does is just to making sure that, again, your seedling is staying tucked in. You do want to make sure that the next day you're knowing what the weather is going to be like in the morning, so that if it's super sunny and hot by 10:30 a.m., you're outside and you're removing that cover because it gets hot underneath of that plastic. And the frost cloth, it should be fine to stay on because it will let light through. But if it's a nice day, why not take it off and let the seedlings get all that fresh light. So we're going to move on here to actually what to seed. And we're going to start with an early season right now. So it's April and May, just to sort of get everyone started. So in terms of direct seeding, what you want to do, sorry, I'm just moving you guys to the top here of my screen. There we go. For direct seeding, things that you can start, I would say mid-April, once your garden bed is all ready and prepared. Garden Talk Part 2, we will go over an insane planting plan for you for your garden bed. But for now, I will definitely say that things like radish and turnip, arugula, and lettuce are things that you constantly want to be seeding throughout this nice early fresh season before it gets too hot and the heat of summer, they can't take it. So for example, in a garden bed, you will have a nice chunk of all of these items. I say transplant over here, but know that a lot of these plants on this entire screen can be maybe both direct seeded or transplanted. For example, a cucumber, I put it over here to transplant because just find it easier to take your plant and pop it in the ground. But maybe you have amazing success with putting it right into the earth as a seed and then watering it and letting it nurture until it's a full plant. So it will depend on your gardening practice. I mean, if you can do it right from seed, more power to you, that's fantastic. Things like beets and lettuce, some arugula and carrots, if you've planted them directly, so direct sown them into your garden, keep an eye as they start to pop up because you're going to want to thin those out. Thinning out just means removing, so there's no overcrowding of those new seedlings. Carrots usually like to be about 1.25 inches apart. So if you have one patch of like 20 carrots, maybe take out a few of those just so a few of them at least have the space to get to their full potential. So as we move into May, you can see there's like a second thing of carrots here. That's because usually you want to get carrots in a little bit earlier because they do take quite a bit of time to mature. You don't want to be direct seeding carrots too much into the heat, so like later in June, just because they will suffer through the end of June, all of July and August before they actually start to really grow. If you're doing a fall planting of carrots, for example, at the farm, I think we planted them in early August, and by the end of August, the weather was getting a little bit nicer, so we had nice full-size carrots by October. A note on fennel, if you do plan on doing fennel this year, we direct seeded it and it was fantastic. It doesn't like to be with other items in the garden, especially if you're doing a raised bed. It lets off these different chemicals that can inhibit growth of other seeds and seedlings. So I would definitely keep that maybe away from your raised garden bed and just in the ground somewhere else in the garden. So I want to go through just a few of these items here for you, just because some of them have really exciting sort of, I don't know, little tips about them. So I want to touch on calendula here. So calendula is a beautiful, beautiful flower. So it's a little bit sticky. It's like, it can be orange generally. It's a nice big sized flower. It's in the aster family. So it's absolutely like amazing and versatile. So we use it as a medicinal. We grow huge rows of it. And then we cut off the flower heads, pruning down to the next bud to encourage more growth. But that flower head, we let it dry and then we pull out the petals and we use that in face serums and other products as well. So it's amazing to even have just little in your garden just to see what you can do with it. You can sprinkle it on top of things because you can eat the petals actually. So it's nice to put on top of cakes, that kind of stuff. So moving over to Swiss chard and kale. Swiss chard, I just want to mention that it usually can't take a heavy frost, but can take a light frost, but it literally grows all season. It is such an amazing crop to have, and it's so sturdy. So I like to use it like as part of the actual design of a garden. Don't get me wrong, I love using it now. I used to not love it because I didn't know what to do with it. But I really love and appreciate it now because it adds nice support in the garden for other crops that grow below it. So I definitely recommend giving that one a try. And moving to, let's move to alyssum. So alyssum is a ground cover. It looks like these sweet little flowers, white, sometimes purple. And what that'll do, it's nice to put in your garden, especially in even an ornamental garden, or if you're doing in-ground, say tomatoes, put that around the base because alyssum will retain moisture. It also acts as a cover crop. So if you're gonna get, say, like a really heavy rain, you wanna have hardly any bare soil. So that goes for a raised bed or, pardon me, or in a garden. Oh my goodness. So for your raised bed, what you would do is just sort of either put in your seedlings or direct seed and it'll retain that moisture. Same with your tomatoes. And if there's a heavy rain, it'll just make sure that your soil isn't compacting. So compacting just means less microbes, less root sort of diversity and space. So it's super important to have a ground cover. I will quickly mention that making sure you have no bare soil in your garden is definitely imperative to the structure of your soil. So once you have your raised bed, you fill it with your soil, you've put your seeds and seedlings in, cover the top of your soil with a mulch, especially like a straw is fantastic. Like I can't recommend it more, covering it just to protect again from rain. It helps to deter a lot of pests, especially something from digging like a squirrel. So definitely try that. If you are putting in seeds, maybe just leave a little patch so your seeds can pop up and then you can cover around them as they do get a little bit bigger. Over here, I put for May to transplant after last frost. So with that, last frost is generally around May long weekend, but again, keep an eye on the weather to see what it'll do. Sometimes it can be a little earlier. Sometimes things like your, I would say your eggplant, your squash, cucumbers, you might want to, and zucchini, you'll want to push maybe even into early June, but it'll depend on your season and if you're growing undercover as well. Okay, so we'll move into the big one, the amazing and important one about supporting farmers and local nurseries, especially at a time like now. I've been in contact with some fantastic businesses and I can't wait to share a few of these options with you. So here we go. We'll start with seeds. Let's start with seeds. So local, you can look into for William Dam is in Dundas. Urban Harvest is out of Toronto. Cole's Garden Center here in Grimsby, they have a fantastic brand called Amers, which is organic, and they have amazing information on the back of the pack for you as well. Of course, there's the option to use OSC, which is Ontario Seed Company. But I want to definitely highlight the seed bank with the Grimsby Library. So they're doing curbside pickup and you just fill out an order form online. And Ryan is going to share a link in the chat for you as well if you want to take a peek at that. Because I believe they're offering up to 4 packs per family, which is amazing to get you started this year. And then moving from local, we'll move into small farm. So for seeds from small farms, you can try companies like Hawthorne Farms Organic Seeds. I have gotten some amazing seeds from them this year, and they've all done fantastic with germination. They're located in Palmerston. Shipping was only about a week and a half, which was great. There's Matchbox Gardens out of Caledonia. And then, of course, there's our very own Sentimental Farm located here in Grimsby on Ridge Road. I had the pleasure of meeting Rob and Chris at the end of last season, and they're just incredibly knowledgeable people. They run workshops. They're going to be doing a bunch of backyard gardening workshops this season, of course, keeping low groups in terms of COVID because COVID numbers. But they're also going to be doing backyard kitchen keeping, or chicken keeping. And hopefully that'll pass through town hall too. And then we can get some urban chickens. So definitely check out their site. That's just through sentimentalfarm.com. West Coast is a company that I use quite a bit. They're out of BC, but we trust them at Mingle Hill as well. They make up a nice big part because they have such a huge organic variety to choose from. And of course, if you can get organic seed first, do that. And heirloom seeds are fantastic, which Sentimental Farm and Hawthorne Farm have so much of. Keep in mind, if you're ordering seeds online, that shipping, especially now as well, I wouldn't say it can be an issue, but if it's an only option, it can take a little bit longer. So make sure to give 2 to 3 weeks depending on delays. So now is a great time to do it. So you're nice and early in time for your spring garden, and then you'll also have seeds for your fall garden. So make sure to think about how many seasons you're going to be growing for. So we'll move on to seedlings. So this is my favorite kind of trip to sort of have or to go on. For all of these options, you do have to pre-order because so much time goes into preparing seedlings, taking care of them, to tend them. If you have not been able to grow your own seedlings or you don't have your own indoor setup, I highly recommend getting some seedlings from these amazing small farms, because it's going to be a huge jumpstart for you to get your garden all prepped and ready. So we'll jump in. I've got 3 amazing options for you. So first off, we'll support our amazing local farmers. And remember, they don't receive shipments of plants and then just bring them to you. They seed them there from hand and watch them grow, make sure they grow, water them, everything. So number 1, of course, I will start with Mingle Hill Farms. So we're a certified organic farm. We're located in St. Anne's, which is just east of Smithville. So just up Mountain Road in Beamsville to the very end. Our pre-sale for seedlings will open on April 22nd and will be available through minglehill.com. So we'll have tomatoes, sweet peppers, hot peppers, kale, zucchini, cucumbers, and a bunch of different companion plants, including calendula and nasturtium, which are always my go-tos to include in the garden. Because again, they're great for your salads, but they add some beautiful color and bring in beneficial insects. So option 2, as I mentioned, is Sentimental Farm. They are doing some amazing seedlings this year. So they have a homestead and it's located on Ridge Road East in Grimsby here. So they do a lot of heirloom varieties that you don't really see too much, which is kind of exciting. They keep these old tried and true varieties going, and they keep them alive each year by selling them to the public and always growing at least a few for themselves, which is fantastic because then they're sort of keeping that specific variety alive for years to come. So just to say, they have 45 tomato varieties this year, which is insane, blows my mind. So when I was speaking to Rob about the workshops, definitely take a peek at those. I'm very excited for everything they're doing new this year, so keep an eye on them. And the last option is the Deer Omi Farms. They're an organic farm located in Vineland. So they grow year round and they offer some great spring seasonal options as well for seedlings. So this year, I was speaking to them, and they're going to be offering some really cool stuff that hasn't been super released yet. So you're the first ones to know. So they're going to be having planted grow kits this year, which you may have seen. They're going to be offered in grow bags. You can check them on their Instagram if you have access there. And they'll have some unique vegetable starts this year too. And that'll include things like seed potatoes, heirloom tomatoes, other chards and kales, artichokes, and celery. And they're going to be posting about those in the next few days, so make sure to keep an eye. So I would say collectively overall, these amazing farms are sort of unknowingly working together to round out your entire garden for you this year in offering amazing heirlooms, the classics that we all love to grow in our garden, those tried and true varieties, and some unique ones as well, which will be super exciting. So make sure to try and support them, or definitely support them when you're ordering this year. I did want to take a quick moment to mention CSAs. So if you haven't done a CSA, that means community supported agriculture. So that is the vegetable box that you would get throughout a season. So these are shares that support the growers, and it also is offered on a weekly basis throughout the season and sometimes year round. So look for farmers posting about those through their farm boxes or their new farm stores and see how you can support them this year too. So we'll move into native plants. So native plants are new. For me, I'm not new. They're newer for me this year in terms of research and really getting into them and identifying them. And I've had some amazing opportunities and mentors to research and look up to. So I'm super excited to share so much with you. So it's so important to garden in balance with nature. Native plants bring in beneficial insects for prey and pests, and there are more imported plants for ornamental gardens than there are native. So that's things like hydrangeas and begonias, and they're beautiful. So it's hard to not, and I totally understand that. And the Halton Master Gardeners is an amazing organization full of resources and planting maps, and is where a lot of information that I learned that came from them, because they're so knowledgeable as teachers and offering to share this amazing knowledge today. So in your garden or your patio, I want you to take a moment and think about what you grow, whether it's ornamental or edible, and how much of it naturally occurs in the region that you're in, or the garden, or maybe in the apartment building that you live, the space around it. So when you're designing or planting your ornamental or edible garden, maybe aim for 70% of space to be made up of native plants and species, because that will really increase the wildlife diversity. It sounds like a lot, but once you sort of get growing and you see all the different options in terms of ground covers or low growing plants, and the height buildup and the different versatility you can bring, it is endless. So in the photo that's up on the screen right now, this is an aster, and this is actually a whitewood aster that I snapped of at Mingle Hill Farms this year. So it's amazing to see them there. So asters and things like goldenrod, they can actually be direct seeded early in the spring. So around right now. So if you can get your hands on some seeds, definitely recommend giving that a go this year. Goldenrod seems to have sort of a bad rep, but it's actually ragweed, which is the culprit for those like insane allergies that you get later in the season, because they tend to look a lot alike and they bloom at the same time. So goldenrod is actually amazing for medicinal gardens, and they look beautiful just as they sway through a garden because they had so much texture. So some amazing goldenrod varieties to maybe give a go or include into your garden this year, especially for that nice meadow look, are varieties like stiff-leaved, blue-stemmed, or zigzag. And again, for asters, you can try something like the New England aster, which is that nice bright purple, or something like here, which is a whitewood aster, which adds as a really nice like filler in a garden. So if you have a lot of flowers, the aster here just adds sort of a bit more, again, of that texture and dimension to a garden as well. So this chart, I apologize for being a little bit blurry. So this chart here is from davidsuzuki.com, and it's from his butterfly project that's been created. So here listed are a few native plants that bloom through the spring. So the list definitely goes on and on depending on where you are in Canada. Again, maybe you're not tuning in from right in this region, but at least for our region here, these are some that you can see, you can plant to eventually then bloom through the spring. So going from this side, this is trout lily, the false Solomon seal, fairy bells, red baneberry, golden alexanders, Virginia waterleaf. Fairy bells is written there again, but we move into wild geranium, and then up top is hairy beard tongue. And they're amazing options to bring into your garden, just as plant this, not that type of option. So our next slide that we've got here is some options for you. So thank you to Emily for connecting me with the Halton Master Gardeners map of this, which was fantastic. This was All the options that are sort of near us that have options of native plants or specifically focus on native plants. So there are definitely a lot that are near us, or I should say at least near the library. And then there are a few a little bit further away, but shipping is ideally the bigger option that they focus on, but there's certainly the option to call and see if you can pick up for so many of these. So if you want to write any down, take a look at what is going to be big for you. Ontario Native Plants has some amazing options this year in terms of like service berries, goldenrods. They have some beautiful, beautiful choices. So I do want to leave you with some great resources for some continual learning and resources. I should say for that last slide, that was just the spring blooming options. On Monday, May 3rd at 2 o'clock, it's gardening talk part 2, and we'll go into the summer and fall blooming options there as well with some grasses. Anyways, so here is some resources I want to leave you with. I'm just going to sort of talk about them. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we can go over them. But some books that I'm really loving right now include 100 Easy to Grow Native Plants for Canadian Growers. And that is by Lorraine Johnson. So anything by Lorraine Johnson is fantastic. She's based in Toronto and is constantly publishing revised versions to become even more specific to different regions, which is absolutely fantastic. Another option I love for a nice winter read is Cut Flower Garden by Erin Benzakein. She's from Florette Flower, so that's just in the Skagit Valley and right on the West Coast. And her book will blow your mind. It's full of arranging for flowers of her flower farm, and her blog is so full of information. And we'll go over more flower tips and tricks in May as well. The third option for books I love is Charles Dowding. He's located over in the UK, and his book, No Dig Organic Gardening, is a great read, and it really wholly practices the health of soil. And he believes so much in leaving it undisturbed so that microbes in the soil can really work their magic. Next, we'll move on to some websites that you should definitely take a peek at if you're looking to expand that knowledge. Halton Master Gardener's website, as I previously mentioned, they're constantly updating their blog and so much research, and it's all from experienced growers and teachers there too. Another website is Hamilton Pollinator Paradise Project website. So that's a mouthful. So this has amazing maps of how to specifically space out and plant a pollinator garden. So I definitely recommend it. It also notes different species to use for certain pollinators. So that can be great if there's certain different insects and beneficials that you want to bring into your garden. Another website is Savvy Gardening. So it's SAVVY Gardening. So this is a website co-created by Nikki Jabor. So she's an East Coast grower out of Halifax, all organic gardening, and she's so full of knowledge and talks so often about growing undercover and growing year round. So if you really love this April season, maybe giving fall and winter season a chance might be for you next time. Epic Gardening, it's a blog written by Kevin Espiritu, who offers so many unique growing options, from grow bags to growing ginger, different kinds of fruits, and so much more. He's located in San Diego, but he has so many amazing options to share, especially as you sort of get your hands dirty and learn different ways to do things. I will say, as many options as there are for so many amazing resources, to hone in on a specific mentor can be really empowering to sort of have one space to learn from and to connect within your community as well. So movies and documentaries that I highly recommend, I had the chance of watching both this year, is The Biggest Little Farm. It came out in 2018 and it's on Netflix now. And it's just so fantastic, so much about permaculture and regenerative growing that you can't go wrong with watching it, and it's just so beautiful. Seed, The Untold Story, is a documentary, and it's about seed diversity and how it sort of declined significantly over the years. And those like pioneers who have continued to uphold those amazing seed saving practices as we continue to move forward. The last thing I'll leave you with as a resource is a podcast, and it is called The Grow Guide. It is a Canadian podcast, and it's so fantastic. Dave and Maggie, who are out of Manitoba, they do talk about a lot in growing zone 3, but they talk so much more about specific plants that they love. They have so many guests on. They talk about permaculture, growing under cover, perennial plants. So I definitely recommend that if you're cleaning or driving in your car. It's a great podcast to have on. So I'll quickly move over just to my contacts here. So again, our next chat is on May 3rd at 2 p.m. And we'll go over like literally laying out your garden. We'll use companion plants and of course the sun. We'll go over some easy to include cut flowers for your garden bed or in ground. And we'll add more pollinators to your garden too. That's plants and the insects too. And of course, we'll touch on native plants a little bit more. If you are interested in a coaching session or consultation or planning or anything, I can be emailed just here at tian@gardenskeepco.com or through my website there. I do run virtual coaching sessions, so if you're interested in those, I currently run them for $40 for 30 minutes. But if you're here today, you can shoot me an email just with the subject line radish, and you will get it for $30 for 30 minutes. So you can send that to me by the end of the day. And yeah, honestly, thank you so much just to Ryan, the Grimsby Library, for being here, setting this up, and being so welcoming to, again, small businesses, to this platform, and letting gardeners sort of learn and do their thing too. Ryan, did you want to take it away with any questions at all we might have?
Yes, definitely. So we've had a couple come in the chat so far. I think someone already answered a question for you though. Just the soil ratio website was a question from James, and Julia thought it was gardeners.com.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay. So you're on the ball, Julia. That's great. And then my coworker asked, is goldenrod something that you have to plant every year?
No, so goldenrod is a perennial, and it does sort of, it can spread. So it's not invasive, but I definitely do recommend if it does start to get to an overwhelming amount, you can just sort of dig it up, cut it down. But it's something that you'll sort of keep in your garden.
Great, thanks, Tia. And also for my coworker, she wonders what makes seed organic?
What makes seed organic? Wow, that's a great question. So a lot of larger companies, seed companies that were actually originally purchased by some pesticide companies, which is crazy. There's coatings on a lot of seeds, or they have been treated. So that just means that the seed has been, quote, tampered with. So organic seed means that or an heirloom seed, it means it has come from an heirloom came from a true variety that stays true to its mother plant. And organic just means that over time it has not been treated or touched by any fertilizers, and the soil it's been in has been cared for as well in an organic manner.
Thanks, Tia. And I should mention to everyone, if you haven't noticed yet, I've put the link to Tia's next talk, which is on Monday, May 3rd at 2 p.m. And the subjects will be vegetable garden layouts, planting plans, and soil health, as well as cut flowers. So you could just click on that link if you'd like to register for next month. Feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions. Or if you have any questions you just like to type, you can type them into the chat below. As we just pause here, I'd just like to thank Tia for doing the presentation. It's been great. I guess I have a question too myself. We're just getting into raised bed gardens here. My house, if you look out the back window, we've got some wood stacked back there for it. And the problem I've had in the past is with slugs. And I had just happened to buy some copper tape for another project, but I understand that can be sort of used as a repellent. For some
Yeah.
reason, slugs don't like it.
Yes.
So I was thinking about, just because the stuff I've got is only about an inch thick, so I was thinking I might just put it around the rim. I think there's kids out there too, in case you're wondering why the wood's moving. Just put the copper tape around the rim of the planting box. Do you think that that sounds like a good plan, or would you put the tape differently, do you think?
So you can definitely do that, but it will depend on how much sort of copper tape that you do have.
Mm.
It can be handy to create sort of little flags or stakes to put in some places of your garden, especially areas that slugs might want to go more so. If you have certain flowers or brassicas like kales or broccoli in your garden, they might be attracted to those more. So maybe planting a few or placing a few of those as well. And I will mention for slugs, sometimes they are a bit more, I don't know, prolific in certain areas that are more damp. So watering in the morning is going to be number one. So watering between like 7 and 10 a.m. Is going to be really big, because then it'll give moisture to the soil. They'll slowly evaporate through the day without the cool evening sort of keeping it moist all night.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I've definitely noticed it's worse in wet springs than
Yeah,
drier springs. Yeah,
fair enough. Yeah.
and we've got
Yeah, you
another
might
question.
benefit from the cover.
Oh, for sure. Okay, thanks, Tia. And so there's another question here from Lisa. She's looking for a recommendation for good compost.
Yeah, so there are definitely a few different companies. There's organic, biologique, there is voila, which is sheep manure. So what you really want to look for is on the back of, if you're buying it just in like a small bag, you really want to check and see that the organic matter or compost percentage is obviously a lot higher, and avoid anything, which is quite common actually, that says synthetic material or words that you can't pronounce. You don't want any of those synthetics or fungicides in there as well.
Yeah, I haven't had the best luck with buying compost at my local grocery store. I didn't think it was very high quality, so
Fair
this
enough.
year I'm
There's
going to
also some
try.
great worm castings too that you can like grow for organics. So that's GRO and the number 4. They have worm castings as well. So that would be actually a great option for when you're topping up between seasons, is using some worm compost too.
Okay, and one thing I'm not sure everybody knows, I live in Hamilton, and I know they sell composters quite inexpensively. I also looked it up for the region of Niagara, and I think it's in the neighborhood of $30 to $40 to get a composter from the region.
Yeah.
So a pretty good price for anybody who's looking to get into composting.
Yeah, that's a fantastic option. And a huge thing about composting too is, depending on what container you have, you can even make one with some wood too, if that's an option for you. But making sure there's airflow through the sides of your composter, just so that you don't get like that mucky sort of sour smell of compost. You want to keep it, fresh and airflow all around it. And those slats, just by layering, it's 2 carbon, so that's like your brown options, to 1 part nitrogen. So that's your green options. So brown options are like paper and straw, that kind of stuff. And your green would be some dead plants without the weeds or seeds, maybe some grass clippings, and your kitchen scraps.
Great, thanks, Tia. Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to, as I said, unmute yourself, or if you have any questions in the chat, that's fine. We'll just hang out here for a little bit longer, and in case any questions roll in. But thanks again, Tia, and also thanks for agreeing to do the presentation next month. I know everybody's probably pretty excited to get gardening this year.
Yeah, I hope so. Get the hands in the dirt, and it just feels so good to finally get outside and get that sun.
For sure. And also I should mention, as Tia mentioned earlier too, and I pasted it in the chat, there's the link for the Grimsby Library seed library order form. So you can't go wrong with free seeds. So I'd encourage everybody to click on that, and you can collect, or we've got a special especially good variety of heirloom tomatoes, almost as good as some online stores. So you could check that out, especially if you're into tomatoes. And then also just a thank you, Tia, from Tara or Tara. A thank you from Killian Lodge, long-term care. So maybe they've been watching there. I don't know if it's been more than one viewer there. That'd be pretty cool.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, I hope my pen pal's there.
Oh, okay. That's great.
Amazing.
Okay, so we're right at 3 o'clock, so maybe we won't keep people past the hour. So thanks everybody for attending, and I hope you're inspired to get out there and garden, and hope you can join us back in a month from now for some additional gardening information from Tia.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, and I definitely hope to see you soon.
Okay, so bye for now, everybody.
All right,
And
bye. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. I'll be in touch about the recording too.
Beautiful.
Okay, take care, everybody.